My name is Caroline Johansson. I'm 28 years old. And for 3 years, my parents called every single employer I applied to and told them I had a criminal record. I didn't. I have never been arrested. I have never even gotten a parking ticket. But by the time I was 27, I was living in a homeless shelter, washing my hair in a gas station sink, and eating one meal a day because no one within 50 miles would hire me. My dad would text me once a week, the same message every time. Come home and apologize and maybe I'll stop. Then one Tuesday morning, a woman knocked on the shelter door and said 7 words that changed everything. Your grandma hired me to find you. Before I tell you what was inside that briefcase, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you truly connect with this story. Drop a comment telling me what time it is where you are right now. I always love seeing where you're all listening from. Now, let me take you back to Harlem, Ohio. The week after my 25th birthday. The day I decided I was done asking for permission to have a life. Harlem, Ohio. Population 4,000 and a little more. 1 grocery store, 1 high school, 1 diner that has been serving the same meatloaf since 1987. The kind of place where everyone waves from their porch and knows whose truck is parked where it shouldn't be. The Johanssons, that's us. We were seen as good, decent people. My dad, Gerald, worked as a plant manager at the Harlan Manufacturing Building for 19 years before it shut down. My mom, Denise, volunteered at the food drive every Thanksgiving. On paper, we were the family people pointed to and said, "See, that's how you raise a daughter." Behind the front door, things worked by a different set of rules. I didn't have my own house key until I was 20. I wasn't allowed to drive more than 10 miles without calling ahead. When I was 14, I started waiting tables at the Route 30 diner after school. Minimum wage. Nothing fancy. My paychecks went straight into a shared bank account my mom opened to keep it safe. I never saw a statement. I never asked. That's just how things worked. I graduated as valedictorian, the top of my class. I had a guidance counselor who pulled me aside in my senior year and said, "Caroline, you could get real scholarships." I brought the brochures home. My dad didn't even open them. He set them on the counter and said, "College is for people who can't work with their hands." So I stayed. I cleaned. I cooked. I mowed the lawn and helped my mom with the garden and listened to my dad talk about how the world was falling apart every night at dinner. And every night, he would look at me across the table and say the same thing. You have a roof, food, and family. What else does a girl your age need? For a long time, I didn't have an answer. The week after I turned 25, something changed. It wasn't dramatic. There was no big fight, no breaking point. I was standing in the kitchen scrubbing the same cast iron pan I had been scrubbing since I was 12. And a thought hit me like a rock through a window. I'm going to be 40 years old, standing in this exact spot, doing this exact thing. That scared me more than anything my dad had ever said. The next morning, I walked to the Harlem Public Library. I sat down at one of the public computers in the back row, the ones with the sticky keyboards and the 15-minute time limits, and I created a new email address. Not the family one my mom used. A new one. Just mine. I found a job listing for a hardware store in Millfield, 20 minutes east. They needed a sales worker, full-time, 9 to 5, with benefits after 90 days. I typed up my application with 2 fingers and hit send before I could talk myself out of it. 2 days later, an email came back. They wanted to interview me. Thursday at 10 o'clock. I read that email 3 times. I closed the browser. I walked home with my hands shaking. Not from fear, but from something I hadn't felt in years. I think it was hope. That night at dinner, something felt off. My dad sat at the head of the table, fork in one hand, newspaper folded beside his plate. He looked at me once, just once, with an expression I couldn't name. My mom stood at the sink with her back to both of us, washing dishes that were already clean. Nobody said a word. The next morning, I drove to Millfield for that interview. The manager shook my hand at the door. He smiled. Then he sat me down, and his smile disappeared. His name was Bill, mid-50s, with reading glasses on a chain around his neck. He had my application printed out on the desk between us. "Caroline," he said, "I'm going to be straight with you." "Okay. Is there anything in your background we should know about?" I blinked. No sir, nothing. He took off his glasses and rubbed his nose. We received a phone call yesterday. Someone, I'm not going to say who, mentioned a felony theft charge. The room felt like it tilted. I gripped the armrest of my chair. That's not true. I've never been arrested. I've never stolen anything in my life. Bill looked at me and I could see it. He wanted to believe me, but he also had a business to run and a phone call sitting in his memory. I'm sorry, he said. We can't move forward. I drove home in silence. No radio, no crying. Just the white lines on Route 30 blurring past. When I pulled into the driveway, my dad was sitting on the porch, newspaper open across his lap. He didn't look up. How was your day, sweetheart? I stood there, keys in my hand, staring at the back of his newspaper. He turned a page. Slow. Casual. Fine, I said. Good. He folded the paper. Your mom made pot roast. I sat through dinner. Pot roast, green beans, iced tea. My mom talked about the neighbor's new fence. My dad nodded along like it was the most interesting thing he'd ever heard. And somewhere between the pot roast and the iced tea, a thought started forming. Small, ugly, and hard to believe. Did they know? I pushed it down. They were my parents. Parents don't do that. I wouldn't be able to push it down for long. Over the next 6 weeks, I applied to 3 more places. A grocery store in Ridgeway, a warehouse on the county line, a diner in Cooperton that was hiring for the morning shift. All 3 called me in for interviews. All 3 canceled within 48 hours. The grocery store said they had already filled the position. The warehouse never called back. But the diner was different. The owner, a woman named Pat, was honest with me. She leaned across the counter and lowered her voice. Honey, someone called here about you. My chest tightened. What did they say? Said you had a criminal record. Theft and fraud. Was it a woman? Pat nodded. Said she was a concerned neighbor. Concerned neighbor. That night, I waited until my parents went to bed. I crept down the hallway to my mom's sewing room, the one room in the house that was hers alone. I opened the desk drawer, pushed aside the fabric scraps and pincushions, and there it was. A small blue notebook. I opened it. My mom's handwriting, careful and neat, the same cursive she used for birthday cards. Down the left column, names. Millfield Hardware. Ridgeway Fresh Mart. County Line Logistics. Cooperton Family Diner. Down the right column, red check marks. Every single place I had applied, checked off one by one. I stood in that dark room holding the notebook, and the floor felt like it dropped out from under me. This wasn't me being paranoid. This wasn't a coincidence. My mother had a list. She was keeping track of me. I put the notebook back, closed the drawer, and walked to my room. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, turning one question over and over. How do you fight the people who are supposed to protect you? The next morning, I placed the blue notebook on the kitchen table. My mom was pouring coffee. My dad was buttering toast. The radio was playing some old country station. Everything normal. Everything ordinary. Mom, I said. Explain this. Denise looked at the notebook. Her hand stopped mid-pour. Coffee spilled on the counter. Then the tears came. But you went through my things. Her voice cracked. Is this how I raised you? Going through your mother's private belongings? You called my employers. Every one of them. You told them I'm a criminal. I did it because I love you. She pressed a hand to her chest. The world out there is dangerous. You have no idea what can happen to a girl alone. I'm 25, Mom. I'm not a girl. My dad set his toast down. He didn't raise his voice. He never did. We're protecting you. Caroline, you think you can survive out there? You can't even cook for yourself. I've cooked every meal in this house since I was 16. He ignored that. Drop this right now. I'm going to call the police. Gerald laughed. One short breath through his nose. And tell them what? That your mom made a phone call? They'll laugh you out of the station. I looked at my mother, tears running down her face, coffee still pooling on the counter. I looked at my father, calm as a Sunday morning, still buttering his second piece of toast. If you don't stop, I said, I'm leaving. He didn't blink. You walk out that door, you walk out with nothing. No money, no papers, nothing. I thought he was bluffing. He wasn't. I packed that night. One backpack, 2 changes of clothes, a toothbrush, my phone charger, and a photo of my grandmother that I kept in my nightstand. When I opened the front door, my mom was standing in the hallway, arms crossed, face dry now. The tears were gone, replaced by something harder. If you leave, she said, you're dead to us. My dad stood behind her, arms folded, filling the hallway like a wall. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. I stepped onto the porch and pulled out my phone. I opened the banking app. Balance. $0. Years of paychecks, tip money from the diner, birthday cash from Grandma Maggie. Every dollar I had ever earned was gone. My mom had been on the account since I was 16. She didn't need my permission to take it. I need my birth certificate, I said. And my social security card. Those belong to this house, my dad said from behind the screen door. And then he closed it. I walked down the driveway at 9:47 p.m. On a Tuesday in October. I had a backpack, a phone with 11% battery, and $12 cash in my back pocket. I didn't have an ID. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have anywhere to go. I walked to the gas station on Route 30 and sat on the curb under the bright lights. A semi-truck pulled in and out. The cashier inside looked at me once through the window, then looked away. At 11:16 p.m. my phone buzzed. A text from my dad. Come home. Apologize. I'll think about it. I turned the phone off. Not because I was brave, because the battery was about to die anyway. I had $12 and nowhere to sleep. But for the first time in 25 years, nobody was telling me where to go. I found the Harland Community Shelter 2 days later. A woman at the gas station counter, the same one who had looked away that first night, told me about it on my second morning of sleeping in a bathroom stall. She didn't ask questions. She just wrote down an address on a napkin and slid it across the counter. The shelter was a converted warehouse on Mill Street. 20 beds, a shared bathroom, and a kitchen run by volunteers. It smelled like industrial cleaner and reheated soup. The fluorescent lights buzzed all night. Linda Marsh ran the place. 47, short hair, reading glasses she kept pushing up her nose. She didn't ask me why I was there. She handed me a towel and pointed to bed 14. You don't have to explain why you're here, she said. You just have to want to get back up. I was the youngest person in the shelter by at least 15 years. I started the process of replacing my documents. Filed for a new birth certificate through the mail. 6 to 8 weeks, they said. I went to the DMV for a temporary ID, but without my social security card or any supporting documents, I got stuck in a long waiting list. Come back in 3 weeks. Then come back again. While I waited, I washed dishes at the shelter in exchange for an extra meal. I swept the floors. I organized the supply closet. I needed to be useful. I needed to keep moving. And I kept applying for jobs. This time, farther out. 30 miles, 40 miles. Places my parents had never heard of, in towns they had never been to. I told myself that distance would fix it. If I went far enough, their reach would end. I was wrong about that too. The restaurant was in Granton, 35 miles south. A family place, checkered tablecloths, daily specials on a whiteboard. They needed a hostess. I applied online at the library and got an interview the same week. I borrowed a blouse from another shelter resident. Took the county bus at 6 a.m. The manager's name was Dave. He seemed like a decent guy. He shook my hand and said they'd let me know by Friday. Thursday morning, Dave called. I picked up on the first ring. Caroline, I'm sorry. We've decided to go in a different direction. My stomach dropped. Can I ask why? A pause. A long pause. Someone emailed us a document. It looked like a police report. I sat down on my shelter bed. A police report. It wasn't a phone call this time. No, an email with an attachment. It looked official. A document typed, formatted, and sent from an unknown email to a restaurant 35 miles away. My father had spent 19 years as a plant manager. He knew how to write memos. He knew how to format official-looking paperwork. He had a printer, a scanner, and old company letterhead that looked close enough to something real if you didn't look too carefully. They had upgraded. Phone calls weren't enough anymore. Now there were documents, fake evidence designed to look like something a background check might produce. That evening, sitting on bed 14, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. But I recognized the pattern. Still cold out there? Doors still open for now? I stared at that message for a long time. Then I deleted it. But something else stuck with me that night. Something Linda had mentioned 2 days earlier. A woman had come to the shelter asking about me. A woman I didn't know. She had left a business card. I hadn't thought much of it then. Now I couldn't stop thinking about it. He called on a Sunday. I don't know why I picked up. Maybe because it was raining and the shelter roof leaked over bed 12, and I was tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. Come home, Caroline. Stop calling my employers. I don't know what you mean. I've seen the notebook, Dad. What notebook? Mom's. With a check. Marks. Silence. 5 seconds. 10. I could hear the kitchen faucet running in the background. The same faucet that had dripped for 3 years because he never fixed it. You're confused, he said. You've always been confused. I'm not confused. I'm unemployable because of you. You're unemployable because you're not ready for the real world. That's what I've been trying to. I'm hanging up. You hang up, you lose this family. I already lost it. I pressed the red button and set the phone face down on the mattress. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the effort of keeping my voice steady for 2 minutes and 14 seconds. I didn't call back. He didn't call again. From that point on, it was only texts. Once a week, sometimes twice, always the same tone. A door held open just barely, to remind me it could close. Thanksgiving's coming. Your mom's making pie. Saw your friend Katie at the store. She asked about you. Getting cold. Shelter can't be warm. Each one was like a fish hook. Each one was designed to make me feel like the problem was mine. That I was the one who had left. The one who had broken the family. The one who needed to come crawling back. I saved every text. I didn't know yet what I would do with them, but something inside me said, keep everything. It was the smartest thing I did that year. After I hung up that phone, I sat on my shelter bed and stared at the ceiling for a long time. I kept thinking, why? Why would your own parents rather see you homeless than independent? I still don't fully have that answer. But I want to ask you, have your parents ever destroyed an opportunity for you and then acted like they were doing you a favor? If that hits close to home, I'd really love to hear your story in the comments. In the quiet nights at the shelter, and they were all quiet, just the hum of the baseboard heater and someone coughing 2 beds over, I thought about my grandma, Margaret Johansson. Everyone called her Maggie. She lived on a 40-acre farm outside of Ridgeway, about 40 minutes from Harland. Chickens, a half-acre garden, and a barn she painted white every spring because she said it kept things honest. She sold the farm 3 years before she died. I was 23 when she passed. Heart failure, quick, the way she would have wanted. At the funeral, my dad cried exactly once during the speech. Then he went back to shaking hands and accepting casseroles. But I kept thinking about the last time I saw her alone. It was about a year before she died. She had invited me out to the farm. The new owners hadn't moved in yet, so she still had access. We sat on the porch with sweet tea, and she said something I didn't understand at the time. If things ever get really bad, someone will come find you. Don't be scared when they do. I remember laughing. Grandma, what are you talking about? She didn't laugh. She just looked out at the field and said, I know my son, sweetheart. I've known him for 50 years. Then she changed the subject. Asked me about the garden at home, whether the tomatoes came in. But there was one more thing. Something she said as I was walking to my car. I sold the farm, but I didn't spend the money. Remember that. I didn't remember it. Not until month 5 at the shelter, lying on bed 14, staring at a water stain on the ceiling shaped like Ohio. Then I remembered every word. It was Linda who brought it up again. I was restocking the supply closet, toilet paper on the left, cleaning spray on the right, the kind of mindless work that keeps your hands busy when your head won't stop. She leaned against the door frame with that look she got when she was carefully choosing her words. Caroline, Remember that woman who came by last month? I stopped. The one asking about me? Yeah. Ruth something. I didn't give her your information. Shelter policy. But she left a card. Linda pulled it from her back pocket, slightly bent at the corner. She handed it to me. Ruth Kalin. Licensed private investigator. State of Ohio. License number PI 201477455-0182. I read it twice. Private investigator. My first thought, the obvious one, was that my dad had hired someone to find me. This was his next move. Track me down. Report my location. Maybe try to get me removed from the shelter using some fake claim. What did she look like? I asked. 50s. Short gray hair. Calm, polite. Linda paused. She didn't seem like trouble, Caroline. She seemed like someone looking for a person she cared about. I slipped the card into my pocket. I didn't call the number. I wasn't ready to walk into whatever trap my father had set up next. I had been outsmarted too many times already. But the card stayed in my pocket. Every time I did laundry, I moved it to the clean pair of jeans. I couldn't throw it away. Something about it kept bothering me. The way she had come to the shelter instead of calling. The way she had left her name instead of hiding behind an anonymous tip. That wasn't how my parents worked. They hid. They lied. They sent things from the shadows. This woman knocked on the front door. Month 7. I was starting to find my footing. My replacement birth certificate had arrived. The DMV had finally processed my temporary ID. I had a photo of my own face on a government-issued card for the first time in my adult life. Small victory. Enormous feeling. Then Linda called me into her office. She was sitting behind her desk with the door closed. That never happened. Linda's door was always propped open with a brick she had painted blue. Sit down, she said. Not unkind, but serious. I got a call today. A woman said she was a social worker. She said you have a documented history of violence and that you are a danger to other residents. The room went cold. That was my mother. Linda nodded slowly. I figured. I've worked here 11 years. Social workers don't cold call shelters to talk badly about a resident. That's not how it works. What did you tell her? I told her I couldn't discuss resident information. She hung up. Linda leaned forward. I'm writing this call down in our records. But I have to be honest with you. If she contacts the county office, if she files a formal complaint through the system, I may not be able to protect your spot here. That's above me. I sat there. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. The baseboard heater clicked. My parents had sabotaged my job applications. They had created fake police reports. They had drained my bank account and kept my identity documents. And now they were trying to take away the last place I had to sleep. Then something shifted inside me at that moment. It wasn't anger. Anger is hot and messy and it burns out. This was different. This was clear. Like a window someone had been smearing with grease for years, and I had finally wiped it clean. I was done being scared. I was ready to be precise. Harlem holds a town council meeting the first Thursday of every month. Folding chairs in the community center. Fluorescent lights. A microphone on a podium that squeals if you stand too close. About 15 to 40 people show up, depending on whether there is a zoning argument or a pothole complaint. Most of the time it is the same dozen retired people and one guy who has been trying to get a stop sign on Elm Street for 3 years. Linda told me, word travels fast in a town this size. Your dad signed up to speak tonight, she said. I went. I sat in the last row, near the exit, in a borrowed jacket. I hadn't been in a public space in Harlem since I left. Gerald stood at the podium at 7:22 p.m. He was wearing his good shirt, the blue one Denise ironed for funerals and bank meetings. His voice cracked on the first sentence, and I could tell it was rehearsed. I'm here as a father, he said. My daughter left home and fell in with bad company. She's living in a shelter. I've tried to bring her home, but she refuses. He paused. He let the silence do its work. A woman in the second row put her hand over her mouth. I'm asking this community to help me reach my little girl. In the front row, Denise sat with her hands folded in her lap, tears streaming down her face. The woman beside her, Mrs. Patterson from the post office, reached over and squeezed her arm. People turned to look at me. I could feel it. 40 pairs of eyes, some feeling sorry for me, some just curious, some already convinced. The man at the podium was a heartbroken father. The girl in the back row was the problem. Nobody asked me if I wanted to speak. The meeting moved on. I didn't say a word. I took out a notebook and wrote down everything my father had said, word for word. Then I left through the side door. After that meeting, Harlem made up its mind about me. The grocery store where I had asked about part-time stocking, the manager's wife had been at the meeting. Position filled. The gas station worker who used to nod at me started looking past me. One of the volunteers, a retired teacher named Barb, pulled me aside during lunch. "Honey, maybe you should just go home. Your daddy's heartbroken." I set my spoon down. Did you hear his speech? Everyone heard it. That poor man standing up there, begging for his little girl to come home. I wanted to scream. I wanted to pull out my phone and show her the texts. "Come home. Apologize. I'll think about it." I wanted to describe the blue notebook with the red check marks, the fake police report, the phone call to the shelter claiming I was violent. But I didn't. Because I had learned something in those 7 months. When your accuser cries in public, nobody listens to the person being accused. A few days later, someone from a local church called the shelter. Not any specific church, just a concerned member of the faith community, suggesting a family meeting to try to make peace. Linda politely said no on my behalf. The walls were closing in. My parents had turned the entire town into their system of watch and control. Every sympathetic neighbor, every well-meaning volunteer, every person who saw Gerald's trembling lip at that podium, they all became part of the trap. But I kept thinking about what my grandmother said. "Someone will come find you." And I kept thinking about that business card in my pocket. Ruth Kalin, private investigator. I had nothing left to lose. The shelter was the last wall between me and the street. That night, I pulled out the card and called the number. She came the next morning. 8 a.m. Sharp. Linda let her in. Ruth Kalin was exactly as Linda had described. Mid-50s, short gray hair, no jewelry, no nonsense. She wore a plain navy jacket and carried a brown leather briefcase that looked older than I was. She sat on the folding chair next to my bed. The shelter was mostly empty. Everyone else was at the day center or out looking for work. "Caroline Johansson?" "That's me." She set the briefcase on the bed between us. On the leather, in faded black ink, was handwriting I recognized. "For Caroline. When she's ready." My grandmother's handwriting. The air left my lungs. "My name is Ruth Kalin. I'm a licensed private investigator in the state of Ohio. Your grandmother Margaret hired me 10 years ago." 10 years. I would have been 18. She paid me a fee up front for a decade of regular check-ins on your parents. Her instructions were specific. Ruth paused. "And to give you this. How did you know it was bad enough?" Ruth looked at me steady. "When your mother called the shelter pretending to be a social worker, I was already watching the situation. I had been tracking the calls to employers for 2 years. I have records of 37 separate contacts your mother made. I have copies of the fake documents your father created. I have everything." I stared at the briefcase. My grandmother's handwriting. A decade of planning. An old woman on a sold farm looking 10 years into the future and seeing exactly what would happen. "She predicted this," Ruth said quietly. "Almost to the year." I reached for the latch. Inside, on top, was a sealed envelope, cream-colored. My name in Grandma Maggie's handwriting. The same cursive she used on birthday cards. "Caroline, if you are reading this, things have gotten bad. I'm sorry I couldn't stop your father while I was alive. I tried. I spent 30 years married to a man just like him. Your grandfather. I know how the walls close in. I know how they make you think the cage is normal. But I spent my last years making sure you wouldn't be trapped forever. Inside this case is your way out. Use it wisely. Don't use it for revenge. Use it for freedom. I love you more than he ever let me show. Grandma Maggie." I set the letter down. My hands were steady. My eyes were not. Ruth waited. Then she opened a second section of the briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. She laid it on the bed and opened it. 5 years of documentation, organized by date, with tabs. Audio recordings of Denise's phone calls, 37 of them, where she called herself a concerned neighbor, a family friend, and in 2 cases, a social worker. Each recording had a date, a phone number, and a written copy of the conversation. Copies of emails sent from an unknown account traced to the Johansson household IP address. The emails had attachments that were made to look like police reports. Ruth had screenshots and data showing exactly where they came from. Photographs of the blue notebook, taken through the Johansson kitchen window during one of Ruth's regular check-in visits. I looked at Ruth. Is this allowed in court? Every bit of it. Ohio is a one-party consent state for recording, and I was hired as a licensed PI. My documentation follows the proper chain of evidence. I closed the folder, opened it again, closed it. There's one more thing, Ruth said. At the bottom of the briefcase, beneath the folder, was a large yellow envelope. It was sealed with a wax stamp, not decorative, just practical, the kind a lawyer uses. In the upper left corner, Law Office of Philip Dern, Millfield, Ohio. I slid my finger under the flap. Inside was a stack of legal documents, paper-clipped and tabbed in blue. Ruth spoke while I read. Your grandmother sold her farm 10 years ago for just under $300,000. She placed the money in a special trust, which became permanent after her death. The trust has been managed carefully, certificates of deposit, treasury bonds, by a money manager at Mr. Dern's office. I looked at the number on the summary page. Then I looked again. $340,000. The only person named to receive the money, Ruth continued, is you, Caroline Johansson. No other parties are named. Your father has no knowledge of this trust. Your grandmother was very clear about that. She told Mr. Dern to have absolutely no contact with Gerald or Denise under any circumstances. I put the papers down on the bed. The shelter mattress sank under the weight of them. Or maybe that was me. Why didn't she just give it to me before? She wrote a note to Mr. Dern about that. She said, and I'm paraphrasing, if I give it to her now, Gerald will find a way to take it. She has to need it first. I looked at my grandmother's handwriting on the briefcase. For Caroline. When she's ready to access the funds, Ruth said, you'll need to visit Mr. Dern in person with a valid ID. A birth certificate or state-issued ID will work. I reached into my back pocket and pulled out the temporary ID I had gotten from the DMV 2 weeks earlier. The one I had fought 3 months to get. It was the right time. She had planned for everything. Philip Dern's office was above a hardware store in downtown Millfield. Narrow staircase, glass door with gold lettering, and a waiting room with 2 chairs and a fern that had seen better decades. Ruth drove me. I wore the only clean outfit I had. Jeans, a white blouse borrowed from Linda, and shoes I had bought at a thrift store for $4. Dern was 64, with thin wire-rimmed glasses. He stood when I walked in and shook my hand with both of his. Your grandmother talked about you constantly, he said. Please sit. He checked my ID, verified the birth certificate I had received by mail, and cross-referenced my social security number through a secure system. Everything matched. Everything was in order. The trust is active, he said. You have full access to the funds as of today. He slid a document across the desk. I signed. My hand didn't shake. Then he said something I wasn't expecting. Your grandmother also left instructions for me. She wrote, Caroline might need a lawyer before she needs the money. He opened a desk drawer. She asked me to refer you to someone if needed. A litigator. He handed me a business card. Ellen Briggs. Civil litigation. Defamation. Harassment. Based in Millfield. I took the liberty of calling her this morning, Dern said. She can see you at 2. I looked at the card, then at Dern. Did my grandmother plan this too? She planned for the possibility. She hoped it wouldn't come to this. I called Ellen Briggs at 1:45. I was in her office by 2:10. By 3:30, she had reviewed Ruth's entire evidence file. Every recording, every fake document, every checked-off entry in that blue notebook. Her exact words, this is defamation, plain and simple. Falsely stating that someone has a criminal record is actionable in Ohio without even having to prove damages. But we have damages. 3 years of them. She filed the lawsuit that week. Gerald Johansson was served on a Monday morning at 8:15 a.m. A process server walked up the driveway while Gerald was checking the mailbox. Mrs. Patterson from the post office was watering her flowers 2 doors down. She watched the whole thing. The envelope, Gerald's face, the way he stood in the driveway reading the first page without moving for a full minute. Denise was served separately, 1 hour later, at the Harland Fresh Mart. She was in the cereal aisle. 3 people she knew from her cooking group were in the store at the time. By noon, half of Harlem had heard. By dinner, the other half. Gerald called my phone 14 times that afternoon. I didn't answer. Ellen had already advised me. All communication goes through lawyers now. At 6:47 p.m. a text came through. You're going to regret this. I'm your father. Ellen logged it. Exhibit 47. The following day, Denise started her campaign. She called 5 neighbors in a single afternoon. Through tears, always tears, she told each one the same thing. My daughter is suing me because I loved her too much. But something had shifted. The lawsuit was filed in county court. Court records in Ohio are public, and people in small towns read court records the way they read the church bulletin, thoroughly. By the end of the week, someone at the diner had pulled up the complaint online. The summary was right there in black and white. Fake police reports. Pretending to be a social worker. 37 documented calls to employers over a 3-year period. For the first time, someone asked Denise the question she hadn't prepared for. It was Tom Adler, Gerald's neighbor of 30 years. He ran into her at the gas station. Denise, is it true you called her employers? She didn't answer. She got in her car and drove home. Gerald signed up to speak at the next town council meeting. Of course he did. The podium had worked once. He thought it would work again. This time, the room was full. 60 people, maybe more. Folding chairs pulled from the storage closet. People standing along the back wall. This wasn't about potholes anymore. I sat in the 3rd row. Not the back. The 3rd row. Ellen Briggs sat beside me, legal pad on her lap, pen in hand. She wore a gray blazer and an expression that gave away nothing. Gerald took the podium at 7:15. Most of you know me, he said. I've lived in Harlem my whole life. I coached Little League. I served on the planning committee. And now my own daughter is trying to destroy this family with a pointless lawsuit. He gripped the sides of the podium. She's been influenced by outsiders. Lawyers. People who don't know this family. I'm asking this community to stand with me. He looked at me. I looked back. I didn't flinch. The room was silent. Then Ellen stood up. My name is Ellen Briggs. I'm an attorney licensed in the state of Ohio, and I represent Caroline Johansson. She spoke calmly. A case has been filed in county court. The complaint and its supporting evidence are part of the public record. I'd encourage anyone here who is curious to look them up, rather than relying on one person's version of events. She sat down. No drama. No accusations. No raised voice. The room was quiet for 8 full seconds. I counted. Then the council chair cleared his throat and moved to the next item on the agenda. Gerald stood at the podium a moment longer. Then he sat down. He didn't look at me again. The court granted the civil protection order 11 days later. 500 feet. No direct contact, no contact through other people, no phone calls, no texts, no letters, no emails, no messages passed through neighbors, friends, or anyone else. Gerald violated it within the first week. He borrowed his neighbor's phone, a man named Dale, who didn't know any better, and texted me. This isn't over, Caroline. Ellen documented it and filed it with the court. Gerald received an official warning from the judge. One more violation and he would face contempt charges. The defamation case moved forward. Ellen submitted Ruth's full evidence package, the recordings, the call logs, the fake documents, the data linking the unknown emails to the Johansson household, 37 calls, 5 fake police reports, 3 years of carefully planned efforts to stop me from earning a living. Gerald hired a lawyer, a low-cost attorney from 2 counties over, who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. After reviewing the evidence, he called Ellen and suggested settling. Gerald refused. I'm not settling with my own daughter. His attorney quit the case the following week. Gerald didn't hire a replacement. Meanwhile, the court records were doing their own work. In Harlem, public documents are public conversations. People read, people talked. Did you see the part about the social worker call? She made 37 calls. Gerald faked a police report. Gerald Johansson at the Harlan Diner where I used to bus tables at 14, the cook told a regular, that girl applied here once. I turned her down because of a phone call. I feel sick about it. The truth doesn't need a podium. It just needs to be available. Slowly, then all at once, Harlem started reading. Denise felt it first. The Thursday Cooking Circle, a group of 8 women who had been meeting at each other's houses for 15 years, sent her a message through the group organizer. We think it's best if you take a break for now, Denise. Just until things settle down. Things were not going to settle down. Then Gerald went to the coffee shop on Main Street. His booth. His morning routine for 20 years. The booth was occupied by nobody. People just weren't sitting there. He took a table by the window. No one joined him. The waitress refilled his coffee without making eye contact. Tom Adler, his neighbor, the one who had asked Denise the question at the gas station, came to the house. Jerry, I've known you 30 years. Gerald stood in the doorway, one hand on the frame. Did you really fake a police report? Gerald closed the door in his face. Didn't say a word. On the legal side, things moved faster. Dave, the restaurant manager in Granton who had canceled my interview after receiving the fake police report, called Ellen's office on his own. He said he was willing to testify. He still had the email with the fake attachment saved in his inbox. Bill from the Millfield hardware store came forward too. He had kept a note about the phone call in his hiring file. He remembered the date. He remembered the voice. I didn't do any of this myself. I didn't call anyone. I didn't post anything online. I didn't go door to door telling my side. I didn't have to. The evidence existed. The court records were public. And the people of Harlem, for all their flaws, could read. The town didn't turn on Gerald because I asked them to. They turned because the story stopped making sense. Gerald didn't show up to court. After his attorney quit, he represented himself for exactly one filing. A handwritten response that said in full, "This is a family matter and the court has no authority over a father's right to protect his child." The judge disagreed. When Gerald failed to appear at the hearing, Ellen moved for a default judgment. The court granted it. Defamation. Wrongful interference with my ability to find work. Money damages, $85,000, calculated from 3 years of lost income and documented harm. Gerald didn't pay. Ellen filed a lien on the Johansson house. I was sitting in Philip Dern's office when the judgment came through. He printed it out and handed it to me across the same desk where I had signed the trust documents 2 months earlier. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Tired," I said. And I meant it. That same week, Dern offered me a job. Not out of charity. He had been watching me organize Ruth's evidence files, build timelines, and cross-reference dates. "I need an administrative assistant," he said. "You're the most organized person I've met in 40 years of practice." I started the following Monday. $16.50 an hour. Benefits after 60 days. A desk by the window with a fern that needed watering. With the trust funds, I rented a 1-bedroom apartment in Millfield. Ground floor. Small kitchen. A door with a lock and a key that belonged to me. I bought a used Honda Civic with 140,000 miles on it. I opened a bank account with only my name on it. I bought groceries for the first time in my life without asking anyone's permission. The apartment was quiet. No one asked where I was going. No one checked my email. No one called my employer. The quiet was the loudest thing I had ever heard. You know, when I was sitting in that courtroom and the judge read the ruling, I didn't feel joy. I felt tired. 3 years of my life gone. 8 months in a shelter bed. All because my parents would rather destroy me than let me go. Let me ask you something specific. If your parents had faked a police report to stop you from getting a job, would you have taken them to court, or would you have walked away? Tell me in the comments. I genuinely want to know. 3 months after the judgment, a letter arrived at the shelter. Linda forwarded it to me. Denise had sent it to my old address. Not my new one. A technical gray area in the protection order, but a violation of its spirit. I opened it at my kitchen table. My kitchen table. Dear Caroline, I'm your mother. I'll always be your mother. Dad says he's sorry. Come have Thanksgiving dinner. We can put this behind us. I read it twice, then a third time. Dad says he's sorry. Not Dad is sorry. Says, like she was reading off a weather report. We can put this behind us. Not I was wrong. Not I shouldn't have called your employers 37 times. Not I created fake documents to keep you from finding work. Just, we can put this behind us, like it was a disagreement about the thermostat. I sat with that letter for an hour. I made coffee. I fed my cat, a tabby I had adopted from the Millfield shelter and named Maggie, because of course I did. Then I wrote back through Ellen, as the protection order required. Mom, I wish you well. But love does not include sabotaging your child's ability to survive. You called my employers. You pretended to be a social worker. You tried to get me removed from the only place I had to sleep. Please respect the court order. Do not contact me again. Caroline. I sealed the envelope, put a stamp on it, and drove to the post office in Millfield. Not the one in Harlem. Not the one where Mrs. Patterson would see me and report back. Then I went home. My home. I cooked dinner for one. Pasta, garlic bread, and a glass of water. Maggie sat on the counter and watched me eat. It was the best meal I had ever had. I'm not telling you this story so you'll hate my parents. I'm telling you because somewhere right now, someone is lying in a bed they don't own, staring at a ceiling they can't paint, wondering if wanting a life of their own makes them a bad daughter or a bad son, or ungrateful or selfish. It doesn't. Wanting to work is not betrayal. Wanting independence is not disrespect. And walking away from people who are actively destroying your life is not cruelty. It's survival. My grandmother couldn't save herself. She spent 30 years married to a man who controlled everything. Where she went, who she talked to, what she was allowed to want. By the time she got free, she was 70 years old and living in a rented apartment with nothing but a sold farm and a plan. But she saved me. She planned it 10 years in advance. She hired a private investigator. She set up a trust. She wrote a letter, sealed it in a briefcase, and hoped I would never need to open it. That's what real love looks like. Not control dressed up as concern. Not sabotage disguised as protection. Love makes a plan for your freedom, even when it costs everything. I'm 28 now. I work as an administrative assistant in a law office in Millfield. I'm saving for community college. I have a one-bedroom apartment, a used Honda, and a cat named Maggie who sheds on everything I own. And I don't talk to my parents. I haven't closed the door forever. But the key is mine now. They don't get to decide when it opens. Grandma Maggie wrote in her letter, "Freedom isn't free, but you're worth every penny." She was right. Gerald sold the house. He didn't have a choice. The lien Ellen filed meant the court judgment had to be paid before the house could be sold, and Gerald couldn't afford to pay $85,000 out of pocket. The house on Maple Street, the one I grew up in, the one with the porch where he read his newspaper and pretended not to know what his wife was doing, sold for $168,000. After the lien, the real estate fees, and the back taxes he had been ignoring, he walked away with just enough to rent. He and Denise moved to a trailer park outside of Galleon, 20 minutes from Harlem, close enough to still buy groceries at the Fresh Mart, but far enough that they stopped running into people who used to wave. Gerald never admitted he was wrong. Not once. He told his new neighbors the same story he told the town council. My daughter was brainwashed by a lawyer. He will probably tell that story until the day he dies. Some people would rather lose everything than admit they were the villain. But Denise did something I didn't expect. Ruth told me months later, during one of our occasional phone calls. Denise had started seeing a therapist on her own, without Gerald knowing. During their third session, she told the therapist, "I think I did something terrible. I don't know what to do with that. I'm not ready to forgive her. I may never be. But I can hold two things at once. The woman who called 37 employers and lied about her daughter. And the woman who finally sat in a chair and said the truth out loud. People are complicated. Even the ones who hurt you the most. But complicated doesn't mean you owe them a place in your life. Healing doesn't require getting back together. Sometimes it just requires distance. That's my story. If you made it this far, thank you. Not everyone has a grandmother who plans a decade ahead. But everyone deserves to know that wanting independence is not betrayal. If this story reminded you of someone you know, please send it to them. Sometimes knowing you're not alone is enough. Hit like if this resonated. Subscribe if you want more stories like this. And if you want to hear what happened when Denise showed up at my workplace 6 months later, that story is linked in the description below. I'll see you there.